On today's Transport Evolved, the car that will just never die, the latest from Formula E, the next-gen Volt gets a new nose job, and why the auto world has gone mad about hydrogen. These stories and more coming up next on Transport Evolved. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode number 219 of Transport Evolved, recorded on Sunday, the 23rd of November, 2014. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield, and I'm your usual host into the world of green and alternative fueled vehicles, smart vehicles, safe vehicles. If it's cleaner, greener, smarter, safer, we cover it here on Transport Evolved. Got two fantastic guests lined up for you at the start of the show, and then a bonus third guest all the way from Malaysia in part 3. But joining me all the way through the show today, a Transport Evolved virgin. Not a motoring virgin, though. He is a well-known freelancer in the UK. Been around the block a few times in the automotive world and in the race car world. Please welcome Phil Huff from Front Seat driving.co.uk. How are you, Phil?
It's driver.
Driver, yeah, sorry. How are you?
I'm very well, apart from a sore throat.
Sore throat, and we're trying for the first time to get
violently throughout this.
That's all right. We're trying to get you on Skype for the first time, which is why we had a few trouble at the beginning of the show. But I can see you're keeping your children occupied in the background. I can see the TV, just the edge of the TV.
Sadly, there's no children here at the moment. That's my wife watching Nanny McPhee.
I see. I thought that was Disney. I thought, no, it can't be. I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to shut up. So, Phil, you're famous for a certain shot. I'm going to share this with everybody.
Okay.
You can you explain this to us? It's a Toyota Prius that's going over. It's not going to show. A Toyota Prius jumping over a hill. What's that all about?
It all started from a Twitter conversation where there was a conversation that any car can be fun, and somebody challenged me that even a Prius can't possibly be fun. So I thought challenge accepted. Spoke to the guys at Toyota who offered to lend me a car to prove it if I could find somewhere safe to play. Spoke to Millbrook, who were up for the idea and let me have their facility for the day, and so we spent the entire day seeing what daft things we could do with a Prius, and that includes jumping it as high as we possibly could.
Now, for those who don't know, Millbrook is a private test track, isn't it? It's not a kind of a public road.
No, it's very, very private. You can't get on there normally.
I just think that's brilliant. Also joining us today on the show from the east coast of the US, although I'm not convinced he knows which time zone he's in anymore because he's been on the road for a very long time. Editor-in-chief of Autoblog Green, Mr. Sebastian Blanco. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, Nikki. Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of weeks. Very, very fruitful though, as far as learning about the. Engage us with this whole let's get the cars cleaner thing. So back in Michigan, I think I know what time it is, and I'm good to go.
Good. Do you have snow?
We did, and now it's like 40 degrees, and it's just wet and nasty out there. So there was snow while I was gone. It's now all melted, and it's just miserable November weather. That's
just insane. I mean, I just want to say, I hope those of you who are in Buffalo, New York, and kind of any west part of New York state are well and safe because you've all had that massive snow, and now you're having the thaw, and I think it's supposed to get to 50 or 60 degrees in Buffalo later this week, which is just insane. Here in the world of transport, though, things are a little bit safer and more sensible. But we're going to talk at the top of the show today about some of the things that you've been up to lately. Now, Phil, you write for a number of sites. You write for dad.info.
That's right, newly relaunched.
Which is a site for dads, really?
It is sort of parenting, help and support, but now with a whole load of lifestyle stuff about movies and games and days out and motoring, of course.
So maybe the metrosexual dad info now. Grooming, style, cars. Yeah, you'll just confuse the heck out of people if we do that. But I don't know if you were covering it for them. I'm assuming you were. You were recently at a test track in the UK. So, sorry, you weren't at a test track. You were at Brands Hatch, weren't you?
Indeed, yeah, Brands Hatch.
And you were testing out inflatable car seats. Not you
I'd
personally.
like to say I was testing it, but I didn't quite fit.
So tell us about those from Volvo.
From Volvo, yes, they're working on new ways of producing sort of child seats. They're at the moment they're getting ever bigger, heavier, more complex as they try and make them safer, and that's causing sort of knock-on issues elsewhere about usability. So they're coming up with alternative solutions, and they've come up with this brilliant inflatable seat, which is made from the same material that you'll get rib boats made out of. So it's strong, it's very light, the whole thing only weighs 5 kilos, and they can prove it's as safe as any other child seat in an accident. So it's something that they're working on, but legislation, as is often the case with these things, is some way behind.
So as any parent will tell you who's got child seats, they take up a huge amount of space in your boot. Now, luckily, yes. I kind of skipped the little kid phase.
Same here.
And I just went to kind of full size children via the booster cushion. So it meant that I didn't have to worry about it too much. But I can imagine that being a real boon to people who don't need to carry a child seat all the time. Other people, grandparents, people who occasionally have to pick up children. I can imagine giving something like that to a friend and going, just in case you need to pick up Johnny from school, keep this in your car. It's not going to cause you any problems. It's tiny, it's compact, but you can blow it up and use it when you need to, when it matters. So that's fantastic.
To give you a sense of scale on it, if you get a normal sort of plastic bag from a supermarket, it will quite happily fit in there.
Yes. Oh, that's not bad. That's impressive. I can't see that catching on though everywhere though. I mean, Sebastian, can you see NHTSA allowing that?
I actually don't know much about these seats. They definitely test things, to the nth degree. So if they work, then yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, it would be interesting to see what happens. All right. The second thing I want to ask you, Phil, is you used to be a racing driver.
Yeah, when I was fit, healthy, and a bit richer than I am now.
You used to race, and so and this recently you've been off to a race place, a Formula One simulator place in England. The only one. Let's Race. The only one in the country.
Yeah.
You get in what looks like a Formula One race car, and you have big monitors. And you race around a track. Now, I don't know which game it is. I don't know if it's iRacing or something like that. But
it's based on a modified version of R Factor.
Oh, that's a very good game.
It's not quite R Factor Pro, which is what the Formula One teams use a lot of the times in simulations, but it's a modified version, somewhere in between the two.
So is this the track day of the future, the green, clean track day of the future? So
It's the stag day of the future. It's the kind of place actually where you can go and have a track day and a few pints of beer as well, and nobody will get hurt. There might be a bit of cleaning up needed, but that'll be about it.
So do we think we can sell this, Sebastian? Eco track days with high-powered race simulators. I've just bought, and it's arrived this week. I've just got an Oculus Rift for the first time. And it's brilliant. I've tried a friend's Oculus Rift with iRacing. And you're sitting there in this seat with your controls and your pedals and your steering wheel, and you turn your head left and you can see out your left mirror, and you turn your head right and you can see out your right mirror, and you look as you're going into the corners, and it's just absolutely brilliant. Do you think this is going to catch on? Green eco?
I'm sure some people will love it. I mean, even at the LA Auto Show this week, there were some concept cars that were designed just for video games. Like they're not even meant to be real, but they sort of created show car versions of them.
So there was one from GM, wasn't there?
Yeah, and it's like powered by a laser or something crazy like that. Nothing that could actually exist, but it shows that video games do have a tremendous draw to people. And I mean, if you like playing a game on your phone or even your big screen TV, why wouldn't you love to play it in a more virtual reality setting? I highly doubt it'll ever totally replace, people actually going and driving a car. But I mean,
it's powered by freaking laser beams.
That sounds like the coolest thing ever.
That would be pretty cool. All right, and the final thing I was going to talk to you about, Phil, was something that Sebastian, I think you've driven this, but it's not come to the US yet. The Outlander plug-in hybrid. Now you've had it recently, Phil, and you've done some tweaks with it. Now the Outlander plug-in hybrid has just absolutely flown off the parking lots or the dealer lots here in the UK and also elsewhere in Europe. Yeah. So, can you see why? Let's go through what the car is and what makes it tick.
It's a full-size SUV, which is its first thing. So they've not compromised on size or anything like that by sticking battery packs and motors in there. But the key bit that sort of really separates it from everything else is the fact that it's the same price as the diesel version. So there's no massive uplift in price for having the hybrid. It's a full plug-in hybrid as well. So in the UK, I got about 32 miles was the best I managed out of it on pure battery, at which point it then switches over to a normal petrol engine. But if you're the right person, you could get away without using any fuel. And if you're a company car driver, the tax is peanuts.
Obviously, that's company car in the UK.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I've met more Outlander plug-in hybrids stopping and using the Chadamo DC quick charging station than I have anybody else, because people are just going, oh, it's got a quick charge socket on, I'll use it. Whereas if you've got a Volt, you don't bother because it just takes too long to charge the car up. You in the Outlander, if it's 20 minutes and you're going to get a coffee, you just whack it on the quick charger to top it up, and then you get improved fuel economy for a couple of miles. Now, there is rumblings about this car coming to the US in a redesigned format, Sebastian.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned it, I actually have driven that car.
Okay.
I forget sometimes. Yeah, but it was the European version, or maybe the Japanese version. I forget now. But they had it at an event in the summer out in California called Plug-in 2014, which is the annual plug-in vehicle conference. And it's like Phil said, it's an amazing idea for a car. Why has no one else come out with a plug-in SUV or even a CUV to this point? I mean, we're waiting on some, the Model X, for example, but no one has that yet. So it makes complete sense, and especially with the price being the same as the diesel, it makes complete sense that these things are flying off the shelf. And that's one reason we're not getting it here yet, is because they're just making two and selling, all of them in Europe and in Japan. But when the next gen Outlander comes here, at least that's, if I remember correctly, that's the one that we're getting in plug-in guys. So hopefully that won't be too long from now. But
well, I mean, I think the hope here is that we are going to be seeing maybe a car that's a little bit more refined. Phil, I don't know about you, but I felt sometimes the ride wasn't as great as it could have been.
No, I think it's sort of fairly ordinary Mitsubishi standard, where it's not quite as good as everything else, but it's equally not bad either.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because but the interesting thing is it's the same price as one of their diesel models.
Yeah.
And that is the important thing. You're asking people to pay no extra for a plug-in hybrid drivetrain, and I think that will be what makes people sort of sit up and take notice. All right, so Sebastian, you've been off to China recently. You've been off to the Challenge Bibendum. So tell us about that.
Well, as I said during the pre-intro, it's a huge event. It's all focused on greener transportation, and that's the broad spectrum of what that means. But it's an event very few people have actually heard of for some reason.
Right.
There were 5,000 or so, maybe 6,000 or so, attendees, speakers, delegates, etc., to the convention, the challenge in China, and I think that's probably about the same as the last few. There was the one in, I want to say 2011. Does that sound right? In Berlin? Yep. And 2010 in Rio de Janeiro. This was the 12th edition of the Challenge Bibendum, and it's put on by Michelin, the tire company, just as a way to bring people together. Their sort of catchphrase or slogan that I heard many times throughout the event was that they want to be an action tank, not a think tank. Huh. We got to have lunch, some of the journalists from the U.S., we got to have lunch with, I think his title was CEO of Michelin North America. He was at the very least one of the main guys from Michelin North America. And when someone asked him, well, can you point to one example of a better tire or something that's come out of any of these challenges, he didn't have a good example. So there's something about where you can say it's greenwashing, but overall it was still a great event. You have lots of people there talking about some very interesting things. There weren't as many cars at this one as there were in Berlin. And I don't know if that's because, Europe is just easier to get people from around Europe to Germany, or if, China is pretty far away from people taking their cars from Europe or from the US. There were some. There were some Teslas there because Tesla's delivering cars in China. You had the Denza EV there.
Interesting. That's the one that's based on the Mercedes-Benz project, isn't it?
Correct. Yep. I think it's some sort of joint venture between, is it BYD and Mercedes and Daimler?
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds
something like that.
Yeah.
So the ride and drive was about the size of, like the running track around a soccer field or football field. So it was a very small area. You could actually drive it. But at least I got to say, I can say now I got to drive the Denza EV all of 3 seconds. But, you take what you can get.
But these events very often are also about sort of finding out who you need to interview in the future, and also getting some interesting side interviews. Autoblog Green did fantastic coverage of the event. I just want to congratulate you guys on that.
It was only me. I was the only one who was able to go.
Well, there you go. So. You did fantastic coverage. I know that's actually where we met in 2011. Yeah. I think we met in Berlin in 2011. But the question I've got, the burning question that I want to ask is, China has been in the news the last couple of weeks for just terrible air quality. Was this as bad? Was it as bad as everyone said? I mean, you were there shortly after the G8 summit, weren't you?
Well, actually, I think it was right before the G8, but right after the APEC summit.
Right.
They kind of flowed from one end to the other. And we were in Chengdu, which is sort of the central western part of China. I think, and it's a big city. It's the 4th largest city in China. But I think the air quality in Shanghai or Beijing are much more noticeable, shall we say. They made a big deal while we were there that when the APEC conference was happening in Shanghai, I believe, for a week or so before all of the presidents and all the famous people got there, that they sort of told the factories to stop making things in the nearby, and they had more restrictions on traffic. So there were actually blue skies in that city when President Obama was visiting, for example. In Chengdu, it was a 3.5 hour plane ride from Shanghai, so it's a long ways away.
Yeah.
There was definitely something in the air. They told us that it's kind of what happens in November, that it's just kind of a mist and the way that the seasons happen. And, we have mist and fog and stuff here too. So I don't know. I wasn't there 50 years ago or even 10 years ago to compare the air.
Yeah. Don't worry. Sulfur dioxide is perfectly normal. It pulls around in the winter. It's fine.
Right. There's no question that there's lots of traffic. Lots of potential ways. It's a big industrial area. I think that's why they had the event there. They make a lot of cars and car parts there. So I would not at all be surprised if the air that we could see was indeed some sort of pollution.
Yeah.
I didn't feel it. There wasn't this oppressive, oh my goodness, I can't even breathe type of feeling. But, I was only there for about 3.5 days, 4 days. So I've been long enough to feel the real effects of it.
So there were two particular stories that I want to highlight based on your time, and Autoblog Green's got a special segment on the Bibendum, and you should go there and read them. But the one that caught my eye was a presentation in which hydrogen fuel cell cars are being demonstrated as being far superior to other vehicle technologies, and the problem, well, I'll show you the chart maybe, and Sebastian, maybe you can talk us through this. It's fairly self-explanatory.
Yeah. Right. When you see it, it is. I'm pretty sure I know which one you're talking about.
It's the hydrogen missing link one.
Right. There were all kinds of presentations, and I went to one of the panels on hydrogen vehicles because this has just been, a 2-week stretch of where I've just heard lots and lots and lots about hydrogen cars. I think we'll get to that in a little bit. That was an interesting panel, and I thought, I'll go listen and hear what they have to say. And someone, and I think the guy from Air Liquide, but I'm not sure. I think I mentioned it in the story, used a chart, and it caught my eye because it just had these, overall CO2 emissions and expected, improvements in the future. Where are we going to go? And for some reason, it sort of had a metric, and I'm not looking at the chart right now, but I think it's miles that you can go versus CO2 emissions. And it just sort of kept EVs in a box that by 2050, we would only have like 120 or 30 or 40 mile electric vehicle. And I am 100% fine with people discussing the pros and cons of all the different technologies that we have. If you want to sit there and argue that, reusing French fry grease into biodiesel is the best way to drive cleaner, that's fine. Let's hear the argument. But I think it's crazy to say that in the next, 35 years, that EVs are not going to get that much better than they are right now. And not to say anything that the Tesla can already go farther than that.
Right. And it does.
Companies are talking about 180, 200 mile cars in the very near future.
Yes.
So when I saw that chart in the presentation, I thought, well, that's interesting. And then in a different part of the exhibit where they were sort of talking about electric vehicles, they used the same chart. So then I thought, this is being used in multiple areas, and then I had to do some research and figure out where the numbers come from, and it's listed on the story. Some PDF that was released in 2011 or 2010 or something. So it may have been the expectations at the time, but I think we all know that that's not a legitimate number for 2050. That you're going to have the maximum of 150 miles in an EV. I mean, to use that argument to promote your hydrogen cars is disingenuous, in the extreme.
Yeah. And Phil, this is a problem we're seeing in the UK, isn't it? We're seeing fuel technologies, regardless whether it's battery, whether it's hybrid, whether it's, a chip fat, whatever. We're seeing almost a lack of truth in advertising, aren't we? A lack of honesty or candor about what these vehicles can do and what they're best for.
That's true. I mean, to go back to the Mitsubishi Outlander, I'm going to give Mitsubishi some credit now. They're claiming 148 miles per gallon out of their plug-in hybrid, but their dealers actually do mention that if you do more than 70 miles a day, the diesel's a better bet. But yeah, you've got range anxiety issues that just people who aren't selling electric vehicles keep coming up with. You've got hydrogen issues where the oil companies are coming up with who's going to build the networks. Everything that's outside of your petrol or diesel is just seemingly getting objections.
And I think the challenge is it not, that we don't actually have a single forum yet where people are sitting down. Maybe this is the forum where we're sitting down and we're discussing that these vehicles are good for certain situations and not. I bumped into another freelance journalist this week at a charging station. He was heading off in the ENV200, Nissan's electric van, and he'd taken it from sort of one corner of Wales all the way down to Devon and back. Yeah. And we were discussing range, and he seemed a little bit disappointed that it was only realistically getting about 50 miles on the motorway. It's got the aerodynamic qualities of a brick, but we were talking about the vehicle being fit for purpose, and the illustration of, yes, this vehicle, you can make trip from A to B, and that distance being 300 or 400 miles if you have the infrastructure, if you have the time and you're willing to stop every so many miles and charge up. But actually in that situation there is a better vehicle that suits your needs. Absolutely. And I think the thing that's missing, and I think it's missing both in Europe and also in the US, is we're not having that conversation about suitability for purpose yet. We're not having that chat about how there is no such thing as a vehicle that meets everyone's needs. And one of the reasons, I think, Sebastian, that the pickup truck is so popular in America, the Ford F-150 has been the #1 best-selling vehicle for 5 years straight now, is that it is the closest thing for many people, when you combine it with a double cab, of being the vehicle that does everything, right?
And it certainly sells a lifestyle. I mean, people buy the truck thinking they're going to use it a lot and then don't. Some people 100% certainly do use them. There are people who work with big, sheets of plywood or that need to carry lots of big machinery, lots of tools. Those people, for sure, it's a very practical car. There are also a lot of people who buy it because it's being sold here as a vehicle that they say can do anything. But it's, I would definitely argue that, okay, there's a time for that and a time for another car. But yeah, I take your point that people can definitely see it as a very do anything kind of vehicle, and that might be a big selling point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. All right, and very quickly, I'm going to ask you to explain this vehicle. You rode on it, Sebastian, at the Bibendum Challenge. It's called the Viper. What on earth is this?
Well, maybe you remember from the event in Berlin, but it's an updated version of what was then called the Vipa. Now it's called the Easy 10. It's made by a company called Easy Mile. And it's basically just, I think in Berlin I called it an elevator on wheels. It's a little box, And the first time that they bring it to a place, in this case to, the Challenge V Bendham, but you could do it at airports, you could do it at like festivals, anything that's sort of a temporary location or a closed, college campus, for example, where you don't want to put it on the main road because it's very slow, but you can do it in certain areas where it makes sense. The first time you go, someone has to drive it.
Right.
So the machine, is programmed along this route. And then after that, it will be able to follow that sort of breadcrumb trail with nobody driving it. And it's kind of a cool idea. Even though we saw a version of it in 2011 and it's now 3 years later and they have an updated version, it still has a maximum speed of, like walking uphill. It's very slow. I forget what it actually is. It might be 20 or 25 kilometers.
That's sad.
Yeah, it's. I can see it working for some people if they can make it faster. Right now, also it has this one particular path it has to follow. If there's something in the way, it doesn't have a way to go around it. It just has to wait for that thing to move. And the guy I talked to, which I haven't written up yet, but will be coming soon, he did say that they're working on a way to sort of go around because you have lots of different LiDAR and radar and technology that's in vehicles to get them, adaptive cruise control and whatnot to avoid crashes. So there's ways that they could use different technologies in a car like this or a vehicle like this. Right now, it's still a test platform. It does work. I was able to ride in it and no one's driving it. It just sort of goes. So that's kind of cool and science fiction-y. But yeah, if you can walk, that's probably the better way to do it.
That's
insane. It's a vehicle at the moment for people that want to go somewhere but don't want to spend the energy to get there, but don't want to get there any quicker.
Right.
There you go. All right. So we're going to finish the segment very quickly, and we're going to have an ad coming up in a second. But this week, a car debuted. I'm using the air quotes at the 2014 LA Auto Show. A car called the Mullen 700E. Which might look a little familiar. And it's familiar because it started off as a Mitsubishi from the 1990s. And then it became, so many different vehicles, I've lost track of it. You last heard of it as the Coda sedan. Now, I got in a lot of trouble this week when I wrote the story because I actually got hate mail because of writing this story from people who said, how dare you suggest that this car's been around before? But it has, hasn't it, Sebastian? Did you see it in LA? The Mullen 700E.
I did see it. I talked to Patrick or Richard Curtis, I think his name was,
Richard
who's
Curtis
one
Jr.
of the guys in charge of bringing it back. And it's of course it's the Coda. Who is possibly saying that it's not?
I don't know. I mean, it was one person. This is the funny thing. I'm going to come clean now. One person in LA somewhere who was pretending to be all these different people but forgot that their IP address all pointed back to the same person. And then they stupidly sent me a message with their phone number in, which also traced back to the same person. So some weird woman in LA.
So no, they're not hiding it at all. They're kind of proud that it used to be the Coda. They say that there was a demand for that car that was not able to be fulfilled because Coda went bankrupt before they got to sell them all. And this company, which used to be called Coda Cars and was then sold to Mullen Technologies, they're like, this is a thing that we can make work. So they're going not totally back to the drawing board, but they're sort of redoing some of the things, a better battery pack. They may, redesign the front and rear end a little bit. They've already added some things to make it more efficient. So with the same battery pack, you get like 30 extra miles of better tires and some undercladding on the back end. But they're fairly confident that they can take the Coda and, make a business out of it.
Well, I hope they can. But
yeah,
I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical. All right, let's have an ad break and we'll be right back. So if you're watching at home, we'll be right back. Do you enjoy the show? Do you like wearing fun and unique clothes that support the things you love? Then you're going to want to head over to www.transportevolved.com/shop, where you can show support of Transport Evolved by buying one of our fabulous Transport Evolved branded apparel. We've got everything from hoodies and t-shirts to water bottles, badges and tote bags, and they'll be sent direct from our partners at Spreadshirt to your home address in double quick time. What's more, by buying something from our shop, you'll be sending us a little kickback as a thanks for our hard work on the show. And you'll get something unique and fun, and we'll get some warm, fuzzy feelings knowing we can continue to bring you a great show every week. What's not to love? Okay, we're back. So, LA Auto Show, all about the hydrogen. That's what today's show title is. And Sebastian, you were there. It's like
Indeed.
hydrogen love this year. I mean, we saw, the Toyota Mirai, which is this vehicle here, finally been unveiled a couple of days before the LA Auto Show. It's one ugly looking car, I hate to say it. Then we had all these other hydrogen cars as well. What's going on? Why is hydrogen such the big thing?
Well, there's a lot of answers to that question. One of them is that, this is the date that Toyota and Honda, and even Hyundai to some degree, they didn't show off their car because it's already for sale here or for lease here, said that they would be bringing hydrogen cars to the US, or I guess to anywhere, because they're starting in Japan first and then will also be sold in Europe. So you have that. You have, I think, part of the industry that just needs something new. And we had, 6 years ago, a whole bunch of focus on biofuels. Now, after that, you shifted over to focus on plug-in vehicles. Now you're focusing on hydrogen vehicles. So I think part of it's just the cyclical nature of the industry where you can't rehash everything. There were only 2 that I can remember now. Well, technically 3. Only 3 new plug-in vehicles at this year's LA Auto Show. One of them being the Coda / Mullen. One of them being the Mercedes S550 plug-in hybrid. Right. And then you had the Audi A7 H-Tron, which is a plug-in hydrogen hybrid.
Yeah. So we're going to come to the H-Tron in a second, because that is an interesting vehicle. And obviously the Mercedes-Benz, we've seen that before, sort of, because we've seen the 500, the S500 plug-in hybrid in Europe, and the 550 is the American spec version. But, in terms of fuel cell vehicles, we have the Mirai. Then we have the Honda FCV. Interestingly, Honda was due to unveil a production fuel cell vehicle, and it ended up doing like an update to the concept car we saw last year, which is very telling, I think. We also saw, which I think is the best pure fuel cell vehicle we saw, was the Volkswagen Golf Sportwagen High Motion, which...
That's a very, very practical package.
Looks just like a regular car. It's got, 3 fuel cell tanks in it. Phil, do you think that car would take off in Europe?
Absolutely. There's no reason why not at all. It's got everything you need from a normal family hatchback estate kind of thing. It's just... It's ordinary, and that's a good thing. That's a positive. Because
I don't see Brits going for the Mirai, do you?
I can't see that selling in anything more than single digits almost.
And the interior, Sebastian, I don't know if you drove it, but I heard a lot of people talk about it being very kind of 1980s flashbacky. There's 2 things to note about the Mirai, and they're both very important. The one is that Toyota doesn't really care how many of these it's going to sell. For the US, they've said that by the end of 2017, they're going to sell 3,000 units in the US. That's ridiculously low.
Going on sale at the end of 2015, that's a little over 100 a month. They're going to sell them in California, and then to start in the Northeast, like Boston and New York area. So that's how many Nissan sells of the Leaf in an average month right now. So they're not really talking to people, after sort of the presentations. That's the Toyota executives agreed with me on that's their message. This is Toyota's big bet on the future. So the car after the Mirai or the one after that, that's the one that really matters as far as sales go. They know that before they can get to that point, they need to get more of them out to customers, and they need to get the infrastructure built. Because otherwise, there's no way I could use one here in Michigan, because it's 1,000 miles to the next refueling station. Right. So this is a preliminary vehicle. This is not the be all and end all. If this fails, the hydrogen's going to fail. That's not where Toyota sees this going. Right. The other thing to note is that it's sort of the other side of that coin, is that for them, this is the next Prius, and that's pretty much how it drives. It's a little bit nicer. It's, the interior, I would not say it's an 80s flashback. It's not a super fancy, oh my goodness, look at all this amazing stuff. It's like if you took the current Prius, and just upped everything a level. So it's not fantastic, but it's nice in there.
Right. So it's not like the first generation Prius, which was very much we want this car to be really super frugal, and as a consequence, you're gonna accept that the interior's a bit rubbish.
This is definitely intended to be a not pure luxury, but a more luxurious feeling on the inside. They told us that it's only a 4-seater, which is interesting, and the back seat has a sort of a console in the center, which originally, if you've driven a Volt, you were like, oh, I bet you there's some sort of powertrain components in there, and they said no, that's purely to make it feel more upscale.
Interesting concept. One of the issues Toyota Europe are facing actually is the quality of the interiors on the Toyota cars. They're not good enough for over here.
No.
And that's something they're pushing back really strongly on. So it'd be interesting to see if it makes it over here, if it actually still does maintain that interior.
Well, interestingly, it's normally the other way around, isn't it? I mean, British cars, you'd get into a UK or a European market car, and it doesn't compare at all well to the American market version, which is a lot nicer. I know, for example, the American market Prius has a much nicer, more plush interior than the British one. So it'd be interesting to see where it goes. The other thing, I mean, the thing I like about, I mean, look, this is the Golf high motion, the Sport Wagon high motion. It's the estate version or the station wagon version, and it's got the same drivetrain as the e-Golf, which I loved. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It just happens to have a hydrogen fuel cell instead of a battery pack.
Right, and that's VW's big push, is saying that so many of their components are interchangeable. And so basically, whenever Toyota and Honda and Hyundai do the work of getting people ready for hydrogen cars, the Audi group or the Volkswagen group with Audi and VW will be like, okay, and here's our car.
Yeah. And that's the way they went with their MQB platform. It's very lightweight. It's very adaptable. It's kind of similar to what Ford tried to do. I just don't think Ford executed it very well. Ford's own modular platform didn't work out as well. Let's talk about though the costs. $57,500 for a hydrogen fuel cell car with free fuel. But Sebastian, there's a real reason behind why that's free, isn't it? It's got nothing to do with people having, needing an extra incentive.
Right. And I didn't know this until I just heard, again, Toyota, their event that they held was one day just full of seminars, all kinds of people talking about the hydrogen economy, the car itself, the bigger picture. And somewhere in there, they said, oh, there's no way that we can, the standards aren't set, so we can't even charge people. So I had to follow up with that later and discovered that, the dispenser pumps that exist right now are not set up to accurately enough measure the hydrogen going into the tank. Now, the car will tell the pump, okay, I'm full, don't put any more in me. But the sensor otherwise, or the dispenser otherwise, would just keep on spitting it out, because you can't say, give me 10 kilograms or 5 kilograms of hydrogen. It'll just keep going. This is very interesting, because this is not a surprise that these cars are coming, right? Like 2015 has been the date for a long time.
Oh, we've been talking about it since I was a kid.
Right. So maybe, and all the panel said, well, it's not a very difficult challenge to do. We just haven't done it yet. And that was also interesting. Well, if it's not difficult, then shouldn't these have been thought of at some point? So when you hear that you're getting hydrogen fuel for free for your cars, at this point, from what they told us, that's because there's really no other way to do it. I guess they could just charge you a flat fee and say, okay, every time you fill up, it's going to be $50, but maybe you only need a top off or something. So at this point, all of the free fuel is much more of a technical reason than, it's an incentive or anything else.
That is insane. Phil, it's not going to happen over here, is it? I mean, that's just going to be can you imagine the EU going, this is not measuring correctly?
That's not going to end well at all. I mean, we'd never have the petrol car now if the EU were involved. Can you imagine putting flammable liquids in a car that anybody can use and driving around outside schools and things. I mean, when it comes to hydrogen as well, that's just going to be something I don't think you can cope with.
The thing that I'm mentioning is, look, in we don't have those like in the UK, and Americans might not know this. You can't lock your fuel filler. You can't lock the pump and just let it fill up. No. You have to stand there and hold it.
Which is insane.
Which
I love it in America. I can just click it, don't walk off, but just stand there and let it.
I just don't see that working. All right. One good thing, though, about the hydrogen fuel cell cars we saw this week, two of them, in fact, the Honda's one and Toyota's one, was that they had a CHAdeMO port on them, which has got nothing to do with them having fast charging capabilities, but everything to do with this, which is Honda's Power Exporter concept. Sebastian, was that at the LA Auto Show?
Actually, Honda did not bring their fuel cell car to the LA show. They did show it in Japan a day or two before the LA show started, but they did not bring it to show in LA, which, kind of surprised all of us because we thought, they would either have a version of it or they'd have enough time to bring it over. But yeah, they did talk about the Power Exporter, and the idea basically is that, you can run in an emergency situation, or I believe even if, there's some sort of grid balancing moment, you can take the hydrogen in the fuels in the car, run it through the fuel cell to generate electricity, and use that to power your house. Which is
a very clever idea. A very, very clever idea. And a lot of electric car owners have been going, could I use that on my car? Yeah, you could conveniently, I think, plug that into the front of something like a Nissan Leaf and pull power out of it. You can't charge the car back up using it, though. And I'm assuming, obviously you can't, unless you did something clever, charge an electric vehicle from a hydrogen fuel cell car. But here's the challenge, because I think you guys came up with an article of how efficient it is, and I remember following it up. It's something like 56 kilowatt hours of electricity for 1 kilo of hydrogen, and at a fuel economy of about 1 kilogram of fuel is equivalent to about a gallon of US fuel. So you're looking at about 60 miles per gallon, aren't you, for these hydrogen fuel cell vehicles at the moment? That's their kind of run-of-the-mill fuel economy. And for that 1 kilo, you're using 56 kilowatt hours of electricity, which seems a bit insane if you're electrolyzing the water to produce it. Obviously, most hydrogen at the moment is produced using gas reforming. So it's just like there's different ways to make electricity, there's different ways to make hydrogen. But the overall efficiency of a pure EV is simply higher than the overall efficiency of a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. Yeah, it is. And but I've got to say though, of the vehicles that we saw coming out last week that were hydrogen or had hydrogen, the A7 H-Tron Sportback wagon, Phil, was the dog's doodads, wasn't it? And it's only a blinking concept car.
Yeah, it's always nice to have something that's desirable. That gets the common man, if you like, interested in it, and actually gets them talking about the possibilities, which that's going to be a good thing. And you combine that with the Hockenheim A7 self-driving car. Yep. Whack that round the track. Job would be just a good one in so many freaking ways. I'm just looking forward to that, and in so many places. All right, we're going to say goodbye to Sebastian because he's got to scoot. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Come back again soon. And for those of you who are still watching, we've got an ad break coming up right now. We here at Transport Evolved believe in the freedom of information and the freedom of the internet. We don't agree with paywalls, and we don't agree with the idea of locking away information just so that those who can afford to pay for it can access it. As a consequence, you won't find paywall anywhere on our site, and you won't find content squirreled away for people who pay to see it. But that means our shows are completely funded by in-stream advertising, and our sites are funded by on-page ads, and of course, your kind donations. In order for Transport Evolved to be a growing, lively information hub for the ever-changing world of future car technology, it takes a lot of time and money to keep our site up and running. Here at Transport Evolved, it takes on average 1 day a week to create the audio-video content you enjoy in TEN and our panel talk show. During the week, it takes hours of dedicated full-time work to bring you the content that you know and respect. So, if you're a regular viewer, listener, or visitor to Transport Evolved, we'd like you to consider taking out a monthly donation to help us pay the bills, keep the wolves from the door, and ensure our show continues to bigger and better things.
In the best traditions of free broadcasting, you can choose to make a one-off payment or opt to subscribe for one of 4 different recurring monthly payments. For £5, £10, £20 or £40 a month, you can help us bring you the honest, knowledgeable coverage you crave. To make your payment, head over to www.transportevolved.com and click on the subscribe link in the right-hand rail. It's that simple. And to those who do, thank you again for your continued support of the show and the network. We're back, and we've got a new guest with us, all the way from Malaysia, where it sounds like it's raining. Cat Dow, what time of the morning is it?
It is about 2:56 a.m. at the moment. It's not raining, it's the fish tank.
Oh, it's the fish tank.
But it does sound like that when it does rain. It literally sounds like the entire Pacific Ocean.
For those who don't know, Kat is a freelancer, works in the UK. She covers all things tech and automotive with a focus on green, a bit like me really. But where we differ is that she's got bright high heels that she is known for. And you are in Malaysia and I'm not. So why have you been in Malaysia, Kat?
Malaysia, the second round of the Formula E Championship.
Fantastic. So
it's been fantastic.
So I'm gonna put some B-roll on, and I want you to give us a bit of a report while it plays.
Okay. So after Beijing, which was a spectacle and a half, you know, at the end of the final corner, final lap, had that massive crash between Nico Prost and Nick Heidfeld, and you couldn't have made that. They couldn't have written it, basically. It was a fantastic way to start a brand new championship. Then we came to Putrajaya, and really this is where things have kicked off. It has been the most amazing weekend. Things for the journalists on this side have been much smoother than in China, as you can imagine. But the race itself has just been almost flawless. If I didn't want to, get too excited about it, but sorry, lizard. But yes, it's been amazing. There's been a really awesome track. The actual shot around the track. I mean, we're working in. It started off at 24 degrees Celsius.
Right.
At about 9 a.m.
Ooh, that's hot.
I like that.
Oh, you are really struggling.
Everyone was a bit worried about overheating batteries. Am I? Oh no.
Yeah, we're losing you a bit. You're losing it a bit. Just keep talking.
Can you hear me a bit better?
We can hear you now.
Okay, so the FIA decided to reduce the regenerative braking storage that the guys were allowed to do from 200 kilowatts to 100 kilowatts to try and avoid any overheating. They'd also changed a few of the regulations. They had taken away the formation lap because it looked really slow on the TV. They'd reduced the qualifying to 2 laps per driver. And they had taken the practice sessions to 1 practice session, which I think the drivers were a little bit like, oh, this seems like a big change, and we like to warm up, and it's different from the way they normally drive because obviously they normally have oodles of petrol to be able to use, whereas this time they are conserving battery power. But it really resulted in the most amazing race. They were able to run it out. It was 31 laps. British driver Sam Bird won for Virgin Racing, so for him to take the victory and for the national anthem to play was a pretty special moment.
So Nick Heidfeld had a bit of a problem, didn't he? Again.
He did, yeah. Again, for the second race in a row, he's been taken out by another driver. This time it was the Frenchman Franck Montagny, who races for Andretti. Frank had quite an aggressive driving style in Beijing, but this time the same aggressive style just didn't really work. I think it's slightly wider track, and I think he thought he had more room in the corners than he actually did. So he ended up running Heidfeld straight into a wall, and the car that they just built overnight ended up going smack bang straight into the wall. Pretty much damaged. Obviously driver is well and safe, but he still hasn't got any points. He hasn't even finished a race yet, so that's got to be pretty frustrating for him.
That must be soul destroying. What was he in previously? I can't remember. Phil, what was he in previously? Can you remember?
Nick Heidfeld, bit of Formula 1 action.
Yeah, That's what.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if he was in last season or not, but
No,
he gave
never
up
actually
Formula
won
One.
a great deal in Formula One, but he is a great driver, but just never had the luck. Seemingly that's continuing.
Now, interestingly, talking about Formula
And
One.
he did.
Sorry, carry on, Kat.
Go ahead, sorry. He did actually race with Nico Prost, who took him out in the first race. So it was quite funny that his teammate from another series was actually taking him out.
That's
but
right,
they were
yeah.
sitting together at the press conference. They've made friends again.
Yep. Yep. So, interestingly, I noticed here, and I don't know if you picked this up, Phil, as well. I saw almost no coverage in the UK, no mention of Formula E. It's all been Formula One this weekend. Obviously, there's a Formula One. It's a nighttime race, isn't it, in Bahrain tonight?
Yeah, I mean,
now, in fact, actually, don't turn off.
Actually, for the race over here, because of course Lewis Hamilton may or may not have won the championship by the time anybody's watching this.
I don't want to spoil it.
Oh, it's Abu Dhabi. Thank you, Kat. Sorry, Bahrain was earlier this season, wasn't it? Sorry.
Yeah. Abu Dhabi finished about 2:30 this afternoon. But if anyone's not seen it yet, who knows who could be champion? But yes, that's kind of overshadowed anything that might be happening in Malaysia, which I've not seen a single thing about that, despite ITV actually having the TV rights for it.
Yep. I mean, ITV covered it, Kat, didn't they? And the race was on TV. There are videos on YouTube, but it just feels like Formula E's not being taken maybe as seriously as it could be, or is that just am I skewed on that?
No, I think it's a lot.
Oh, we're really losing Kat now.
The problem, I think, with the broadsheets, obviously could mention it more. They do, in their sports section, they do tend to limit motorsport anyway.
Right.
Am I back?
You're back.
They do tend to cover just Formula One. They don't cover BTCC. They don't really cover much of the motorbikes. So it's that they're being deliberately. It's not necessarily that they're being deliberately obtuse about Formula E itself. They do miss out other motorsport series, but I think that this year you're probably going to see a lot more features, a lot more questions of whether this is really sustainable, whether this is really worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Now,
and hopefully next season. And I think it will also change next season.
Cool, Phil. I mean, we are struggling a bit with the audio here. Phil, one of the challenges that people have laid against Formula E is this whole concept of the car swap.
Yes.
Now, electric car advocates and fans who know their technology, and I'm going to tell you, Kat, it's kilowatt hours, not kilowatts, is that they're saying you could have built these cars with plenty of capacity to make the track, to make it all the way around the track, all the way around the race, and without this silly car swap idea. Yeah. And a lot of people are saying this is actually just negative to plug-in vehicles and green car tech. As a driver, what do you think?
As a driver, I wouldn't want the cars to actually last the whole race because they'd be far too heavy. That's the biggest problem with them. You need the lightness. You need to be able to actually feel the car and enjoy it. But it makes a mockery of it that you've got to actually get out the car and swap into another one. The public watching and people, 90% of people aren't motoring enthusiasts, and even those that are, even fewer are electric car enthusiasts. They just don't understand why that needs to be done, and it just makes it look like electric cars simply aren't viable.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there are quite a lot of motor racing fans that I've seen. Electric cars seem to attract motor racing fans and also flying fans. I know lots of people who have pilot licenses in electric cars, and I know lots of people who are really into racing and have electric cars. And in fact, I know a couple of test drivers who've got electric cars as well, who test drive for some of the racing teams. So there is a connection. And obviously the driving experience there, but I know that Kat, there are a lot of questions that are going to have to be answered successfully in this opening inaugural season before we see this really big sponsorship, big sponsors coming on board and Formula E being treated a bit more fairly in the media, right?
Yeah, I think that it's going to have time to develop. I think the other thing is that next season there are going to be more reg changes. At the moment, the teams are using stock cars that are delivered by Formula E Holdings, the promoter, and that was to get the season off the ground ASAP. I think next year you'll probably see BMW there. Yeah. You may see some of the other manufacturers become constructors, and that'll be because the regulations in terms of the chassis shape and whatnot will be more free.
And of course, at that point, then it will become a proper world championship, because it needs a minimum number of different manufacturers and car designers in order to do that, doesn't it? It needs to have, I think is it 10? Am I right? I can't remember.
Yeah, and they need to go to more countries, I believe, as well. So there's a convergence of particular regulations that you need to be able to get world championship status. Yeah.
Well, let's thank you for your report, by the way. And if anybody else wants to watch, there are some very, very good videos on the YouTube site from Formula E. Kat, I hope you'll stay with us until the rest of the show. But if you're feeling exhausted, that's quite all right. We'll understand. But we're going to push on now with some news from Mr. Musk. This week he hit the headlines, bless him, Mr. Elon Musk, for multiple reasons, including one warning us about Skynet, which did make him sound a little bit stark raving bonkers. I'm sorry, Elon. He also confirmed that the Falcon wing doors are going to stay in the Tesla Model X. So, from an engineering point of view, that is a mammoth task. And as a motoring journalist, I'm sorry, again, and I upset some people saying this a couple of weeks ago, I cannot, with good conscience, recommend that anybody buys a Model X in a launch state, because it's going to take a while for those doors to settle in and for Tesla to get really, really good with it. I can't think of a single car that's been made in history, Phil, with any kind of lifting up doors or unusual doors that's not been problematic, right?
But any car that has always been incredibly cool.
It has been incredibly cool, and I've owned a car with a single door that went up like that, and it was awesome. And I also the Twizy, obviously with its side lifting, sort of not quite Lambo doors, sort of quasi Lambo doors. That was brilliant. So you like the Falcon Wing doors, Phil? Yeah,
absolutely. I know there's no real logic to it, but they are just cool. That's as simple as it gets. Any car with gull wing doors or scissor doors or Lamborghini doors or whatever you like, anything that's outside of the ordinary, it just looks cool. Unless you've done it in the Halfords car park on the cheap on a Nova.
That's true. Then it would be not so good. Kat, do you buy the whole it's easier to get into the back seat thing?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's going to make sure that you can get your heels in without showing your nipples is always a good thing, right? I think they look fantastic on the SLS AMG. There is nothing better than that electric drive SLS AMG in that beautiful metal blue. So, yeah.
I just wish that they'd make more of them. Mercedes-Benz has got a beautiful car there, and they just don't seem that interested in making huge numbers of them. That is, you're right, it is a gorgeous car, and it's got torque vectoring, etc., etc. And that's awesome.
I had a DeLorean for a small while, and even though the car itself really isn't very good, I couldn't help but stop and ask people for directions, even when I knew where I was going, because it just meant I could open the door, ask them where to go, close the door, and I was off again.
I hope that you kept a small canister of of liquid nitrogen that you could just feed as you open the door. Don't touch it, it's cold.
I really wish I had.
That would have been brilliant, wouldn't it? All right, so Tesla Model X is delayed. We talked about that last week. It's confirmed. Elon Musk has now gone on the record again. No, the Falcon Wing doors are going to stay. The Falcon Wing doors are going to stay. The Falcon Wing doors, they're here to stay. Okay? And I think as a way of shutting people up, Tesla posted this video this week, which is of its factory, of the factory upgrade to the production line. It's time-lapse video. It's incredible. Now, this is the Tesla factory in Fremont. It's a former NUMMI plant. They're building all of these robots on site, bringing them in, and basically increasing the number of vehicles that they can produce. So they have 2 production lines. Obviously, they're doing some test work here. This is to the trim panel. It's a fantastic, fantastic time-lapse that you can see on the Tesla Motors website and on their blog section. And it's a big facility. If anybody has actually been to NUMMI, they will tell you it is, the Tesla factory, the former NUMMI facility, which is now the Tesla factory in Fremont. It is massive. It is monumental. Have you been there, Phil?
No, sadly not.
It is just massive, and it is interesting to see that the way that Tesla's slowly kind of colonizing that building. And I imagine that the Gigafactory is going to be very similar. They'll start off with a small corner and then it will just get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's very, very interesting. All right, so S-Class plug-in hybrid, the S500. Have either of you driven that before?
No, I get to play with it on the 12th of December, I think it is. So not long.
Hey, Kat, have you driven it yet?
Not yet. I took an S-Class out, but it wasn't a hybrid.
No. The 550's just debuted in LA, and as Sebastian was saying earlier on, it's kind of one of 3 plug-in vehicles that debuted. But this is the thing that I don't get. 0 to 62 time, so 0 to 100 kilometers per hour, of 5.2 seconds, a top speed of 130 miles an hour, and 20 miles of all-electric range. It just doesn't light me on fire. Does it light you on fire, Kat? Or are you just kind of like, no?
It's 20 miles, is that it?
Yeah, Phil?
I mean, I guess it's you.
It's the acceleration's always a good thing. The maximum speed's not strictly relevant. I'm assuming it's been limited because of heat issues with the actual joining of the hybrid motor and the petrol engine. But I don't know. I'll find out when I get to play with it.
It just feels like it's a bit like when BMW did their Active Hybrid 7 series, and it just made me feel just limp. Just went, oh, do I have to? I can't really be bothered to. And it does just feel like this is a car that's built to tick a box rather than this is a car built to inspire. Now, Kat, you were saying the SLS AMG, 4-wheel drive, torque vectoring, absolutely immense car to drive. This is kind of like the polar opposite, isn't it?
It is. I mean, and quite honestly, I wasn't hugely impressed with the normal S-Class. I thought it was actually quite... In fact, if anything, Phil, I think that you'll probably find that the acceleration would have hugely improved, because that was the one thing about the S-Class that really wound me off. It was quite slow off the mark. It didn't help that, at the time it was alongside a Rolls-Royce Wraith that was significantly heavier and significantly faster. But aside from that, it did feel a little bit slow. Mm-hmm. So I think reserve judgment until it's been taken out is usually my general rule.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when people start buying it, but I think it'll sell in China. I don't think it's going to sell anywhere else. And let's be honest, the S500 is not a big selling car, hugely selling. I don't think that's going to be a hugely selling car. I think people will go for a Tesla rather than go for that.
I'm losing you there, Nikki. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I said I think people will go for a Tesla rather than that, which is going to be interesting. All right, Phil.
They might do, but in the UK at least, with the company car tax rules, it brings benefit in kind down to something like 9%, which is that's a massive reduction in somebody's tax bill. So that could sway a few people.
It could, especially if they tighten up the tax regulations to make sure that people are actually paying the tax that they should. Not going to go any further than that. All right, so also in LA, we're going to the last LA Auto Show story of the day. The Chevy Volt has been teased as long as I can think of any car. I mean, this is something that someone said Ford's been doing for years, and now Chevy's doing it. We're going to show you a sneak peek of this car. We're going to show you a sneak peek of this car. This is what this car looks like. You're not going to see it all until next year. This is what the car sort of looks like. Here's the back, here's the front, here's the inside, here's how it works under the bonnet, here's what the charge port door looks like. Well, this week at a special event just for owners at the LA Auto Show, they showed off some new features of the new 2016 Chevy Volt, which we'll see at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit in January. Here's the list. It's got a new front end, which we already knew, which is slightly more angular, slightly more handsome. It's got a nice V shape to it. I think it evokes a little bit more the Corvette look, actually. It's pushing more towards that than say, the run-of-the-mill cars. It's supposed to look a bit more speedy, perhaps. I say ish. It doesn't really look like a Corvette at all. But it's kind of pushing towards that end of, I maybe would like to be one when I grow up. The charge port door now has an illumination on it, which is good if you want to plug in at night time. And there's also this GPS awareness that will allow you to store whether I plug in when I get home, I want you to charge straight away, or I want you to wait until the wee small hours to charge. And the rest of the places you go to, it'll just charge as soon as you plug it in, which is a good thing. But there still seems to be a 3 kilowatt onboard charger, which is pants, and a 110 volt. This is one of the things that Chevrolet's proud of. A longer plug, a longer charge cable. Phil, help me out, Phil.
It's the only thing that stopped me buying a car. I looked at it and went, do you know what, that charge cable's just not long enough.
It's just, I'm not being lit up by this car, Cat, are you? It just...
Do you know, I actually think it's quite funky looking. I mean, I was a big fan of the Volt. I didn't really like the hella shiny rims.
Yeah.
The first one carried, they seems bright. And so obviously the Vauxhall Ampera had kind of toned a lot of that down a little bit. But I actually think this looks really sporty.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of blue, which obviously spells it to me.
It's a blue car, I like it.
I think things like the illuminating door, be a proper girl. So I think the whole illuminating door thing always kind of surprises me a little bit, because I think, did you not think that first? But yeah, I mean, you bring things in iterations later.
Let's put it like this.
Yeah,
I've hit the wrong thing at night time trying to plug our Volts in. We've got a Chevy Volt. We've got a first generation Chevy Volt. And yes, I'm excited about the bigger battery pack. I'm excited about the better the 4-cylinder, more efficient, essentially an Atkinson cycle, but it isn't quite an Atkinson cycle gasoline engine. That means better fuel economy. It means less trips to the petrol station, and obviously bigger battery pack. They haven't talked about the range officially yet, but everyone's saying 50 to 60 miles. Now, if that is 50 to 60 miles in the same way that the current generation is 30 to 40, I can get 50 out of our current one, so that means the next generation I would be able to get 70 or 80, which is Leaf territory, really, in reality. Yeah. But at the same time, it just feels like people are saying we want faster charging. I don't see any evidence of that. And I'm worried that this is maybe not the step up that Chevrolet needs to be making, GM needs to be making, in order to hit that 2017 affordable car. And it's going to be an interesting lead, because next year we're going to see the new Volt. The year after we're going to see the new Nissan Leaf, which everyone's talking about will have a bigger battery pack or options for battery packs. And the following year, Chevy will come out with this all-electric 200-mile-ish car. So it's going to be an interesting time. We've got the Tesla Model 3 coming out at that same time frame, if Elon Musk can get everything working in time. We've got the Audi 270 mile range car promised about the same time. Volkswagen, obviously its sister group, saying the same thing. So we're looking in 2 or 3 years time, people are going to be getting 270, 280 mile cars. It won't just be a Tesla Model S thing, which leads me to the final question. Does this mean that people are going to not buy an electric car until then? Cat?
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, I think that's a very real expectation. I think one thing that the Volt did for us, obviously provided another option to the Prius, which carried the kind of misconception you might have if you're a Prius owner, that it just wasn't really cool enough. And I think that Volt did actually bring that little bit of edginess to a car that helps the environment. And, playing the green card doesn't always work when you're thinking about people's convenience. The electric cars are great, but they're just so expensive now, and until that battery technology can deliver more range, you have got to provide something to allow them to make that move. And the Volt is a great stepping stone. And so I do think that you could find that people will maybe opt, especially if, like Phil says, the company car tax relief favours that. And I think that is something that most legislative bodies really need to be looking at. I know that the Netherlands recently have taken a lot away because it's been so good at encouraging people to take up electric and hybrid vehicles that they've actually losing out on revenues now, so they've had to remove a lot of them. But really, yes, they absolutely will probably not go electric until they see either a huge cost reduction where they can own the car outright. I'm not sure that the leasing model is entirely likeable, is entirely appealing. It also, I think as well, you've got to consider that all these different cars offer a myriad of different options for the myriad of different people we have on the planet that have a myriad of different interests. Yeah. So the bigger the better.
It's going to be an interesting one.
It's hugely disparate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think Kat's right as well, actually, that it's not the range anxiety that people so often talk about that's the sticking point. It's the cost of the cars. When you can buy a car for $15,000 and an electric equivalent is double that, then that's a pretty convincing argument not to buy the electric car in the first place.
Right. And the challenge also, I think, we were talking about this on last week's show, is to have some cars on the market in 5 years' time that still do 70 to 100 miles per charge, but are down at that 8, 9, 10,000 price point, because that is the starting point.
Absolutely.
And it's about social mobility.
Yeah, you're asking people to change their behaviour, and that's a huge step to change. And people will be prepared to do that if it has especially a genuine cost benefit. But I think until it has that, the Soul EV came out a couple of weeks ago, last week. I have no idea about time now, but when the Soul EV came out, 24,995 on the road, and the petrol version's 12,600 is a huge step.
That is a big challenge. It's a really big challenge. All right, final story. This is our and finally, and we're going to go to poo. If you are a parent, you're
not again.
Yes. If you're a parent,
average Sunday.
If you're a parent, your life is ruled by poo, and this is a poo bus. It's in Bristol, so it's just down the road from me. It's powered by methane generated from people's waste. That's it going down the down by the gorge there, down the Avon Gorge, and that's on its way to the airport in Bristol. So if you come to Bristol by plane, and you get off at the airport and you're getting a bus back to the centre of town, you could be riding on poo buses. It's a new fantastic project. I can't cover this sensibly. It's brilliant though, isn't it? Are we going to see methane-powered cars? We have seen a methane-powered Volkswagen Bug before. But do you think we're going to see poo methane transport of the future, Phil?
It's not something I can see happening. It's going to... on a purely logistical level, I'm going to try and keep a straight face on this. On a purely logistical level, you're going to have to replumb everybody's houses. You can't, unless you just have a bucket kicking around, and I don't know how it would work. I don't know the ins and outs, so to speak.
Well, how it works is your sewage goes down to the sewage treatment plant.
Yeah. And
instead of putting it in one of those big things with the open air, they basically ferment it and take the methane off, along with all your veg matter and everything else that you've thrown away in your recycling bin. And then they capture that methane, they store it, compress it, and then you have compressed methane running your cars. And it's just like compressed natural gas, except it's more natural than natural gas, because it's,
Well, in that case, as long as I don't have to have pictures of people doing their business on the side of a car, then there's no issue with it.
Cat seems suitably disgusted by the whole thing.
No, honestly, I actually think it's a wonderful idea. I think it's one of the first practical applications of such a material. I mean, I'm not a huge environmentalist, but I do think that it's important to try and give back to the planet Earth that we live on. And I think one of the things that is really very obvious when you start to pick away at it is that, we just don't really give back as much as we take. And so I think if, this is something that happens naturally, we've got a lot of people on the planet, and, if we can do that cheaply, then
go for it.
Why not?
Go for it. All right, that really is it for today's show. Thank you very much for joining me, Kat. all the way from Malaysia.
thank you,
I do
Nikki.
apologise to everyone who has been watching and hearing strange noises. It's not me. It's not Cat. It's just the connection and, you know, the fact that she's more than halfway around the
Human
world.
relation being
More than
bitten to
half
death.
the way around the world. So we'll do some post-production cleaning up in that. But where can people read you and what you get up to, Kat?
You can obviously see everything that I write and get published on www.catdow.com. That's CATDOW.com. And follow me on Twitter at Cat Dow.
Fantastic.
I'm always happy to get involved and see what other projects there are out there. So, yeah.
And you're
just
going to
tweet
come
me.
back next week when you're back in Blighty and the connection's better.
I am.
You're going to come back next week and you're going to talk about something that you're working on with. Very exciting, motorsporty. So we'll save that until next week. Safe travels.
It's more motorsporty stuff, but it's more eco-drivey stuff. So,
Yes.
yeah, it's all good. I look forward to it.
Tell us about that next week and have a good night's sleep. And thank you for staying up so late. Phil, where can people find out more about you?
No worries.
Thank you for joining us.
Cheers, Kat. You can find me on frontseatdriver.co.uk or on Twitter. I'm always at frontseatphil, tweeting all sorts of inane car-related things and shamelessly promoting things I've written for either myself or other places.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, press launches are not the same without you, Phil. It's working in the automotive world. For those who don't realise, the UK automotive world is not huge. There's a small core of freelancers who tend to go to the same kind of events, and so you end up, it's like a big extended family, and you all meet up and you have a good natter on the plane, and then you get down to work.
You make a lot of friends.
You do make a lot of friends. Thanks to everyone who's watching at home. Thanks for joining us, and I hope that you had a enjoyable show. Don't forget, you can find us on YouTube. You can also find us on iTunes if you look for Transport Evolved. We do a MP3 version of this show. We also do a full video version of the show with any problems with audio sorted out. The YouTube version, for those who are watching, we did have a YouTube problem with the audio at the beginning, which is down to me, wasn't down to anything else. We will be fixing that, and then we'll be uploading a new version of that late tonight, early tomorrow morning. So if the YouTube version isn't where you expect it to be, that's where it is. If you are having Thanksgiving this week in the United States, I wish you a very merry, happy Thanksgiving. We had our Thanksgiving dinner yesterday, so thanks to our friends in Bristol for that. We will have a show next Sunday. We will have a show next Friday as well, but the output, obviously being Thanksgiving week, is going to be a little lighter. If you are travelling to Thanksgiving, please be safe, and until next time, folks, don't forget to plug in. See you soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.